All right. Let me see. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Hashnode Interviews. Today I have a super fun guest. I have Rishab Kumar from Twilio with us, and we're going through the topic of that's often overlooked by us developer, but super important, the essential toolkit for writing in the dev world. So we'll talk about how developers like you and I can write better, document your work, and even build stronger communities around you. So let's get into it. Okay. Hello. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, good. How have you been?
I'm doing great too. I'm super excited to have you here and learn together with you.
Awesome. Yeah,
Can you give us like a quick introduction about you, your background, what you do, and so on?
for sure. So, hey everyone, I am Rishab. I am a developer evangelist working for Twilio. And if you're wondering what developer evangelist as a role is, it's basically developer relations. Uh, and you can look that up. But I started creating public content back in 2020 when COVID hit. And for the first year, it was all technical blogs. So I'm great that I'll be talking about, some essentials tools for writing today because over the years I've found some hacks and tools that really help me with the creative process of writing either technical documentation or even blog articles. So excited to be here.
Amazing. Okay, let me pull your presentation to screen and I'll let you take over and have fun. I also have a few questions prepared here ahead of time. So in the very end of the presentation, I'll pull questions from the audience and also my questions to state so we can go through them. All right.
Awesome. So yeah, uh, like I said, I'll be sharing some tools that I use as a technical writer. Again, going back, started blogging in 2020. At that point, I was self-hosting, and it was quite challenging to come up with, to find the right template, or if I want to use WordPress or want to build my own React site. And at that point, I was not an expert, especially with front end. So I used different tools, found different templates, and decided to self-host it on a cloud provider. But there was a lot of challenges, and I'm just gonna give you some context. How my journey started. But what I was really passionate about is technical writing. So I would find issues with whatever the cloud problem I was working with. So I was at that point I was a cloud operations engineer, and if I figured something out, I would be like, oh, let me write a blog post about it so that I can remember in the future if I have to come back and look what I did. And it turns out there were thousands others who would run into same problems and would find my blog post. And in the first year, from 2020 to 2021, I published 36 articles, which was a lot. Not all of them were, really high value articles, I would say. Few of them were hacks for SQL. A few of them were how to implement load balancing in AWS. And towards the end, that's when I discovered Hashnode. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. You know, a lot of my problems will go away because the I was not happy with the UI, how it looked. I was not happy with how the content management worked, and I really wanted a tool that would take that away. So the first tool that I would recommend is Hashnode, right? Because you have capabilities of having your own domain, which I really preferred because I wanted to build my brand identity, right? I wanted people to come to blog.rishabkumar.com so that they can associate me with my content. And I think that was a big factor why I chose Hashnode as a platform. Along with that, I also didn't have any newsletter at this point, so that was another functionality that I really liked. So I think these two can really make a powerful impact on your audience if you're trying to grow with your technical writing. That being said, there are some other tools that what I would like to share. So editor, back then I was using Hemingway app, and you can go to hemingwayapp.com, and it does some cool analysis of your paragraphs and stuff. But now I use Hashnode. So Hashnode's own editor now has AI capabilities and had Grammarly uh, installed by default, right? So you get all these predictions within the Hashnode editor when you come up with a draft. I love it. And talking about writing, because this is where the process started of writing an article. So you got the editor, but the preferred language I used was Markdown. So I love platforms that support Markdown. It's a lightweight markup language, right? And if you have a Google Doc that you have set up, maybe you had some different process earlier. Like I said, I was using Hemingway app earlier until I switched to Hashnode after a year. I don't know how to pronounce this person's name, so I'm not going to butcher it, but it's the second point on the slide. It's a clipboard to Markdown, so I would copy my content from my Google Doc or my Hemingway doc and paste it to this clipboard, and it would convert the headings into the correct syntax for Markdown. It would convert the lists into the correct syntax in Markdown. And then I would copy that over to my website, which was, I believe I was using Gatsby as a static site template for my blog at that time. And then you can also look up the Markdown guide if you don't know what the syntax is and you want to do different things in Markdown. So Hashnode does support Markdown as the markup language, right? And I love that. So you can go to markdownguide.org/cheat sheet, and it will give you, different syntaxes for headings, subheadings, lists, iframes, embeddings, and stuff like that. So I would highly suggest you to check these out for Markdown. The next step would be grabbing screenshots. So, and these are still images. So I'll talk about screen capture later in this interview. But screenshots, so still images, it could be code, it could be non-code, right? I prefer to use like code blocks in blogs. So code blocks help it is more accessible to the readers. They can copy and paste from it. But if I have to show something like an output in the terminal and want to make it look beautiful, so that is when I would use code screenshots. And I'll get to it. So coding screenshots, code, terminal, or terminal outputs, those were the use cases that I could think of at that time. And then non-coding screenshots included web interfaces, software interface, and like just the UI aspects of something that you wanted to share. And the tools that I used for coding screenshots, you might be familiar with this, is carbonnow.sh. So this is how the UI looks like, as you can see on the right. You can pick a theme, you can pick a language. It could also auto-detect what your language is, and you copy whatever the code you want. So in my case, it would be terminal output, and paste it into this tool. And then you can click export, and it would generate this cool image with the code you want to share. Again, don't use this for sharing code. Make sure you use code blocks because it's not accessible. People cannot copy and paste this. For interfaces screenshots, I use shots.so. And I'll have a live example of this, but you can see on the right-hand side, that's how the interface looks like. That's how the website shots.so look like. You basically copy and paste the screenshot you captured. So you can use Greenshot. There are a few others. Mac has Screenshot as a tool. So you do Command spacebar, which will allow you to search, and then you just type in screenshot, and it'll give you the capability to capture your screen as a still image. And then you can bring that screenshot and paste it in this tool. And I'll show you how this makes it beautiful. So you can see that there are a few customization that you can do. You can do a retro uh, pane, you can do glass dark, you can do glass light, you can also add curves and make your screen capture round. You can also have a gradient background at the end or at the back, like in the background of your screenshot, which looks cool with the shadow effect, as you can see on the slide. And that is why I use this. And it kind of make my blog posts uniform. So like every interface or UI screenshot that I would have will have this gradient background. So people would, identify that, oh, this is Rishab's blog post because of the gradient in the blogs. Here's a QR code, which is a blog that I published a few weeks or months ago. And you can check that out. You can see how I use different gradient screenshots throughout my blog posts and also share the terminal outputs by using carbon.now.sh. But yeah, I'll give you a minute to scan this QR code if anyone is interested for an example of how I use these different tools. Okay, I think that's enough of the time for you to scan the QR code. Coming to screen capture. So this is where, you want to capture your screen when you're doing something. So not still screenshots, but maybe you want to record your screen doing something. So there are a few tools that I've tested, and my favorite one is OBS, and you might be familiar with this. It's heavyweight. There is tons of configurations, so you really might need to check out a few YouTube videos and documentation to set it up to whatever your preference is. And it's heavyweight, so you'll need like a good amount of power in your PC or laptop to run OBS. And then there are some lightweight options. So screen to GIF or screen to GIF, depending on however you pronounce GIF or GIF, is really lightweight. But the caveat is it's only on Windows and it exports GIF. So I love that because, who doesn't use GIF? You can see me on Twitter, replying to random posts or replying to people using GIFs. That's how I communicate. So I use that format for my screen captures too. That's what I love about screen to GIF, and also that it's lightweight. But it's only on Windows. Then you have LiceCap, which is also lightweight. It also exports GIF, and both Windows and Mac OS support is there for this app. And then you also have the Mac OS built-in screen recorder. You'll just have to change the video type to GIF later. So I believe it'll create an MP4 file, and then you can use something like Cloud Convert, or you can Google any of the converter tools where they'll allow you to convert MP4 to GIF. But yeah, so those are the screen capture tools that I use. And that's basically the kind of the essential tools that I use for writing my articles. And not just articles, I would also like to say like technical documentation. All of these tools help to create a creative documentation or blog so that, your article is accessible, it's more understandable with the audience. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions regarding any of these tools.
That's awesome. I love the presentation and thanks for sharing it. And yes, we do have a few questions. Let me see how I can break up the screen here. So I have a few questions over here, and I also know that we may have a few questions from the audience. So getting started here, what tools from the ones that you have displayed to us, or like any other ones that you use, do you consider a must-have or indispensable for long-form technical writing, and why?
I think a good editor can, like, hands down, will help you so much, especially when you're, jotting down ideas and
Hmm.
writing that first draft. I think that is like the major reason why I love Hashnode, because sometimes I'm on my phone and I'll be like, oh, this is a really cool blog post idea. And I can just do hn.new, which generates a draft in Hashnode, and quickly, write down ideas of what the blog post would look like, then come back
Hmm.
later and, you know, really sit down and just write down the entire blog post. Also, what I was showing with Hemingway is, as I said, is now like natively supported in the Hashnode editor, with also Rix being part of it. So you have not only the large language model or like AI capabilities now, but even before then, you had Grammarly, and it would suggest like, hey, your paragraph or your sentence is too complex. Maybe you want to dial it down. So things like that, I think, like having a good editor can make your blog post really stand out. And this is even
Absolutely.
before, yeah, this is even before you asking someone to review your blog post, right? So I think that just streamlines the process.
I agree. I agree. Especially like getting a content review can take like so many rounds of iteration. So the better you can get it done and the smoother the process, the better it is for sure. And now, in terms of writing technical articles and so on, when you got started, like during COVID and kept going, did you have any core principles that you followed when you were tasked with a blog post, technical writing, or like something like a video that was also technical? Did you have any core principles in there?
Um, yeah, so I think initially how it started is uh, I'm trying to remember the exact story here, but I loved documentation, and I used to do this for the company that I worked for at that time, specifically for cloud architecture and the infrastructure itself. And one day I figured something out with Nginx and one of the Linux servers that I was working with. So like I troubleshooted something and I'm like, oh, this was the issue and this is how I fixed it, kind of thing. And I wrote an internal um, document for future reference for the team. And that's when my manager was like, this would be a public problem. Like there could be other people out there. There could be other infrastructure engineers who might be facing this. Do you have a technical like blog or your personal blog that you manage? And I'm like, no. And I was really early in my career, so he highly recommended having a technical blog. And I'm like, okay. And I basically copy pasted the most of the doc that I created internally to the that was the first blog post that I did, and making sure there was no sensitive information about the company.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how it started, and then I, as I said, I was already doing it at the company with docs and internal tooling. I just found a passion for doing it, like in my additional time too. Like I was really passionate about writing good articles, specifically for cloud and DevOps. So I think the first 3 months, it was just if I come up with something at work, I would publish an article about it. Again, keeping in mind no sensitive information was shared. But
Absolutely.
later, I think I built like a discipline of writing one blog every 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
um, because of how therapeutic and fun and
Do you
creative
still have
process.
like that habit of creating a blog every 2 weeks, or you kind of like increase that frequency, or that went away?
It it is more like once a week now. Oh, sorry,
Okay.
once a month. My bad, my
Okay.
bad.
Okay. Okay.
Once a month, and that is too shared between Twilio's blog and then my personal blog. So maybe 1 month I'm publishing something on my personal blog, and the other month it's on Twilio's website. And yeah, I think the shift that I had last year from not creating videos to creating videos every month um, has really taken up more time, and I have less time that I can spend on publishing blogs. That being said, I still like I would prefer to do written content.
Absolutely. And even when going back to this review process and sharing with your team and getting the blog post reviewed, do you have like any specific workflow for both editing and revising technical content? And like in there, this specific area, are there any specific tools that help you in this stage?
Yeah, so I would say shout out to the amazing community that is on LinkedIn and Twitter or X, whatever it's called nowadays. But yeah, I've made some friends over the years where, I'll write up a draft and I'll send them the draft, especially for my personal blog, especially for tech review. So let's say I'm doing something in AWS or Azure, and for me it would make sense because you're an SME in that topic, or you're an expert and you know how to do things, but think about the audience, and maybe they don't have the same context and knowledge as you.
Absolutely.
So that's when I'm like, hey, can you take a look at this blog post and try to do the steps that I mentioned in the blog post. And then um, most of the times you do get feedback saying, hey, like I ran this command and it didn't work because I was missing something. I'm like, oh yeah, because by default, you don't think of things uh, suddenly because your system is set up in a certain way that you might have already all of these tools pre-installed. So that's where I think, yeah, having it reviewed by someone who is not you is essential.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and I think you can do that for language and accessibility too. Like, hey, this makes sense to me. Like, language wise, does this make sense to you? Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, make sure you're more, you're inclusive of, you're using more inclusive language and things like that. Yeah.
For sure. So even when going into those tools and resources, like I myself, I use a lot of Hashnode's AI and also Rex, both to check my grammar, see if I have any typos, and also like when I have an idea, I'm like, okay, can you generate an outline and see how I can break down this topic and so on. So I use Rix a lot, both for that and also for generating code snippets, so I can place them in my blog post just to illustrate all the topics. But I wonder, like, if you have any other tools and AI tools more specifically that you integrate in your workflow for technical writing.
So shout out to Aditya Oberoi. I call him
Okay,
Augie.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. He works at Appright. You might have. I think he was on Hashnode Interviews at some point.
Yes, yes, yes. He was together with us, I think, in one of the first editions, if not the very first, actually.
Awesome. Yeah. So he built something with Azure, which generates alt text. So again, if you're sharing images, to keep in mind the accessibility aspects of it, you need to have alt text for your images. And sometimes, you might have 10 images that you're sharing in your blog post. I think so. His tool, what it does is you upload the image and it generates alt text. I think it uses computer vision to detect things and what's happening in the image. So that is one tool, I think, which is like close to those AI tools that I use. And it's free. He built that tool in public, which is awesome. And yeah, I can only think of that tool, apart from the things that you mentioned already.
Amazing. And even like thinking about these very specific tools for alt text and images, like when writing blog posts, do you have like specific rule for like the amount of images that you use in your blog post, or incorporating visuals like diagrams or flowcharts into the documentation and so on?
Yeah, I don't like I do have a rough idea in the beginning, but oftentimes I go over that estimate. So like, let's say I'm like, okay, I'll compare, these three services within the cloud providers, and roughly I'll have 9 images because 3 screenshots each for a service. But then as I write down the blog post, I find like, oh, maybe showing the interface at certain points would also help. So it adds up. And most of the times, what I've found is the estimate that I have is always lower than um, the images that I ended up using.
Awesome. And even like you also mentioned a point during the text review with friends and so on about the target audience specifically. Even when you have like a rough idea, you go to Hashnode, put down the title, save it as a draft. How do you actually determine the target audience for a technical blog post and so on? Like, do you have multiple series, or how do you break down that article and target specifically like to a person that you are targeting?
Yeah, so I think I have found like a good space where you know my more general, like, most of my articles are surrounded within the cloud and DevOps space. That's like my brand. It has become my brand over the years. But then every now and then you'll see like a random post on how to do XYZ in Linux, or how to do this in SQL Studio. And those ones I write because they're missed out. So like, I ran into an issue with my SQL Studio, right? Um, or MS SQL Studio. And I searched on Google. I couldn't find much. I went to Stack Overflow. There was one person with a comment saying, hey, maybe try this. And I'm like, oh, that worked, but there is no article that exists. And
Mm-hmm.
thinking it from the SEO perspective, if there is information that's missing and you know about that, you know about the solution, I would say, yeah, at those times I go out of my niche, if you want to say, or my brand, and publish that article and be like, hey, I figured it out and it might help others. So
For sure.
you'll definitely see some articles that are like, could be considered out of cloud and DevOps brand that I have, and then everything else is within the.
Very much around the brand. Uh-huh. So even when focusing on that and kind of like determining your niche when writing, how did you come up? Let's say I want to write about cloud and so on, and like how did you determine your niche, and how many times per month or how many times like throughout the week do you go out of that niche and kind of like publish something, let's say on X or Twitter or on your own blog, like of you learning as you go?
Yeah, so I think maybe like once every 2 months you will see a blog post that is not my niche, because I'm doing the codes because it changes over time. Like I'll have more expertise maybe in AI in a few years, and maybe that's what I want to write about
Mm-hmm.
from 2 years from now. um, the initial um, thought process was nothing but just writing. So never thought this would be my niche, or software development in JavaScript would be my niche. I just you know sat on my computer and started typing, um, and was like, okay, one article is done. Um, what else can I share with the world that will help, again, the problems that I was facing in my role at that time, the technical problems. So I kept writing, and as the title was Cloud Ops Engineer, and then later I was a DevOps engineer, that the articles that would come out of me were around that space, and that's basically how my brand got built up. Um, And also, I think it makes sense because that's where my expertise lie as of right now. That's where most of my experience is, and I can talk confidently about the tech there. And then, as I said, your niche will evolve as you evolve as a person and as your technical skills. You keep gaining more and more experience and more skills. So I'm not really close to the fact that I might change um, the topics that I write about, but I do know there are certain amount of people that are interested in the content from me around the cloud and DevOps space, and I have a respect for that. And you'll see, at least for the near future, you'll see that more content in that space from me.
That's awesome. And okay, I have a couple more questions. So when breaking down content like in the DevOps space or in the cloud space, how do you approach outlining those very technical and complex topics before diving into the writing phase? Do you have like let's say a board? You're like, okay, this can be exemplified as this, or how do you go about that? And how do you make like super complex topics into simple terms? How do you translate that?
Um, I use a lot of analogies, and I think the audience that consumed my articles were really able to like find that early on, even when I didn't realize. Like I use a lot of analogies that can be related to real world, and I think that that's how I understand, and I feel like the audience that I've built is also like in the same spectrum of understanding things when it comes to technical concepts. So, I break it down to like something that you do in the real world, like driving a car, right? Um, so yeah, I think that's my kind of um, the method I use. I usually have like I don't I, it's not a whiteboard, but it's basically a notebook. I still
Mhm.
use pen and paper or pencil and paper to just
Awesome.
jot down ideas and kind of like understand, okay, does this make sense, or am I just shooting too long? And yeah, then I just sit down and like, hey, do you know containers? But do you know also like Legos? You can compare them in a realistic way and hope that it connects with the audience. But yeah, analogies is the way.
For sure. I also love analogies and try to use it as much as possible. I even remember in my Web3 years that I was like having to translate super technical concepts into like very simple concepts where people who were not part of the Web3 world and developers who were getting into Web3, like they needed to understand how things worked and how actually what was the purpose of the whole infrastructure. So analogies is definitely the way to go. And okay, I have a great question by Michael over here. So, to help build our online presence as writers, do you have any suggestions on where can we guest post? For example, Michael has written for Free Code Camp, Scrimba, I Code This, and the HTML, all things so far.
Yeah, I think you're already doing very well with collaborating. Like Free Code Camp is huge. Scrimba is huge. Um, I code this. I've heard about it. So like, um, I also know there are like companies that have um, I guess guest writers kind of programs, and they also pay you for it. So like, I don't know, maybe you're passionate, like I know for Twilio we have a Twilio Voices program. So people who are passionate about Twilio and maybe have some blog that they want to write, they can come in and write for the official Twilio blog. And similarly, I know there are other companies that do that to build your online presence, because these brands already have kind of a huge audience that they're serving. And I think it's a very good way to, you know, bring that audience to your personal blog, which you might be hosting on Hashnode. And yeah, I think it's a clever way of building an audience and also relationships. Like, writing for a free code camp, I think looks really cool on your not only your resume but also having that relationship with free code camp will serve a good purpose.
Even on this front of free code camp and personal branding for technical writers or developers, how important do you think personal branding actually is for developers' career growth?
Um, my point of view has changed over time as I like kind of experienced different things during my tech career. I think it definitely helps. It helps a lot once you have established your brand. You're known in a certain niche. It makes it easy to find new opportunities, and also it is kind of rewarding to be known um, for something that you're passionate about. So, like for example, the Twilio job that I got is because of the branding that I've built, as a technical educator with my blogs and YouTube. So, and there are several other opportunities that came my way, um, and they wouldn't have if I didn't have a personal brand. So I think it's definitely
Absolutely.
important. Um, yeah, but you need to find the right balance. Um, so I know Carolyn Pitt shared a really interesting X post or tweet yesterday, where he was comparing impressions and number of tweets he made when he didn't have a job, and now that he has a full-time job. And it's crazy to see, like, you know that you can't keep up with posting regularly on X, posting blog posts regularly. Like, as I said, in the initial year, I post 36 articles, which looks awesome now, because I'm like, I don't know how I did that in the first year, because you now have a full time job. So you need to find the right balance. Like, don't push yourself too hard to have a personal brand. Like, you can find a balance of, hey, maybe I'll post once every month, and if you stick to that and if it works for your schedule, awesome. Because by the end of the year, you'll have 12 articles, which is better than zero, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so I think, yeah, you need to find the right balance, but I definitely think personal brand helps a lot.
Okay. All right. We're going 10 minutes over time right now. So I'll give you some time for you to share any last thoughts or any last insights here to our audience.
Yeah, I think I already kind of gave you, like, finding, so build personal brand, but also like find a good balance. Don't get yourself burnt out. See what works for you, and then kind of stick to it and look it out for the long run. I know often um, we start seeing numbers on social media and we start chasing them. It's not about, like, those numbers. Just keep pushing the content out, whether it's articles, whether you're a video person, so maybe it's YouTube videos. um, it'll help you build that person brand. And maybe it's 100 people, it doesn't matter. I had 2 people read my blog post in the initial 6-7 months, and I was so happy because I'm like, oh, these 2 people spend 10 minutes to go through my blog post, which is awesome. um, so yeah, just stay motivated, build your personal brand. You can check out my personal blog at
Absolutely.
blog.rishabkumar.com for any inspiration. You can reach out to me if you have any questions on how to get started. I know that I had a little bit of hesitation in the beginning of building it out in the public. This stream might not tell, but I'm I'm kind of introverted, so it was hard for me to just come out and start publishing technical articles. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me on X, whatever your preferred social media is. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can also check out my articles that I write for Twilio at twilio.com/blog. And yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for accepting my invite and joining me here today. Not only me, but all the audience got to learn a lot from you, and also how to put yourself out there and break down, like from being an introvert to actually having to speak up and share. So I really appreciate you, and looking forward to more collaborations and interviews and chats with you very soon.
Thank you, Danny. No, thank you for having me. It was fun.
Absolutely. All right. I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much. All right, guys. You see here a lot of people really excited about the chat. Okay. So thank you so much for joining me today here. So we are wrapping up, or I'm wrapping up today's Hashnode interview. Huge thanks to Rishab Kumar from Twilio for joining us and diving into the essential toolkit for writing in the developer space. And we got to cover a lot of ground over here today. So anything from tools, platforms to best practices, and everything in between when it comes to technical writing and personal brand as a developer. So don't forget to try out all the tools that Rishab showed and shared with us here today. And let us know what you think. Please do check out Rishab on X or Twitter, and also Hashnode, and tag us once you have tried those tools so we can know if you enjoyed it and what's your feedback around them. So keep coding, keep writing, keep building your skills, and I'll catch you in the next edition of the Hashnode interview. See you guys later.